Crafters Library. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this thank you card featuring products from the Pink Paisley Vintage Vogue collection. At the end of this video, I'm going to tell you how you can enter to win the Pink Paisley Vintage Vogue prize pack. So let's get started. You're going to need 5 different patterns of designer paper that each measure 1.5 by 1 3/4. You're going to assemble them in the patterns that you wish them to be across the front of your card. And then, because they're 1.5, you want the height to be 1 3/4. You're going to then stick these to each other, overlapping them so that the only part that's showing is 1 inch. So this is where grid paper comes in handy. So I'm just going to run some double-sided adhesive down the one side of the right-hand side of my square, and then I'm going to take my second square and I'm going to stick that down to my double-sided adhesive on the other piece of designer paper and leaving only 1 inch showing on the front piece. You're going to repeat that, layering all 5 pieces. So now that you have this part complete, you're then going to go to your paper trimmer and you want to trim this up so that it measures 5 inches wide by 1 3/4 inches high. So you're going to trim off your last designer paper here at the 1 inch mark so that this will only be 5 inches wide. So as you can see, I'm back from my paper cutter. I have trimmed off my right-hand side of my designer paper so that I have a 1 3/4 inch high by 5 inch piece of designer paper. That is 5 different patterns, and each pattern is a 1 inch piece of designer paper. You're then going to need a piece of Lavender Twilight cardstock that measures 3 3/4 by 5 inches. You're just going to lay this along the top without sticking it down yet so that you have placement for your greeting. You're going to stamp your greeting, and here I'm using the Thank You from Paper Trays Inside and Out Thank You stamp set. And I'm going to stamp this using jet black archival ink from Ranger. And the reason I have this is because I want placement and I want to stamp my greeting on before I add my dry embossing. So you're just going to take and stamp your greeting towards the left-hand side just below your designer paper. So now that you've stamped your greeting, you can set aside your ink and your stamp. And you're now going to need the Perfect Polka Dots embossing folder from Stampin' Up! I'm going to remove my strip of my designer paper and I'm going to lay my cardstock inside my embossing folder, embossing the entire piece of Lavender Twilight cardstock with the Perfect Polka Dots embossing folder. So off to the big shot. So now that you're back from your big shot, you can remove your paper from your folder, and you're now going to stick your designer paper to the top part of your cardstock using some double-sided adhesive. So you just want to flip that over and make sure that you run enough adhesive over the back part of your designer paper here to ensure that your strips of designer paper are well stuck together and that it'll also stick down to your embossed surface. So I'm just going to line this up with the top, left, and right-hand sides of my cardstock and stick that down. And because you placed enough adhesive on the back, that will stick quite snugly. So now you want to take a piece of the 1/8 inch basic black taffeta ribbon from Stampin' Up! That measures 6 inches for this one. You're going to need the 10 inch one in a minute, but you're going to take a 6 inch piece, lay it along the bottom seam of your designer paper, wrap the ends around to the back of your cardstock, and stick them down with some double-sided adhesive. And you just want that ribbon to cover the bottom seam of your cardstock, of your designer paper there. And I like to come back and make sure that it's nice and straight and that I'm happy with that. Now our next step is to add in our faux stitching. And in order to do so, you're going to need your mat pack. I can set aside your 10-inch piece of ribbon as well as your double-sided adhesive for a moment. And you're going to need a mat pack and a paper piercer tool. So you're going to lay your cardstock onto your foam mat, and then you're going to take your small guide here and align that. I'm going to align 2 different rows down the side here with the edge of my far right hand side piece of designer paper. So I'm just going to center the edge of that far right 1-inch strip of designer paper there in between these first 2 rows here. So just lay that down, and once you have the seam of the designer paper in between those first 2 rows, you're going to punch or pierce every other strip in your first, or every other hole in your first row, and then you're going to alternate the holes in your second row so that it will give you that zigzag look. If you wish, you could always stitch this with a machine if you wanted to, with some black thread. So I'm just going to pierce every other hole, and then the alternating holes on the other side. Again, skipping every other hole. I'm going to repeat that for all of my strips of designer paper here, and then I'm going to come in with a very fine tip Copic multi-liner marker here, and I'm just going to draw on, removing that from my foam mat now, draw on the stitches in between, connecting each one of those pierced holes. So I'm just drawing a line connecting them. And you're going to repeat this for all 5 strips of designer paper, and this will give you that stitched look across each of your patterns of designer paper. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've added all the stitching to the 4 rows of my seams for my designer paper. So it gives me that quilted look to the front of my card. Now I'm ready to add this to my card base and my final mat. So you're now going to need a piece of perfect plum cardstock that measures 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. You're going to center and stick this matted piece of designer paper, or with your quilting on it, onto your cardstock with your double-sided adhesive, leaving equal borders on all 4 sides. You're now going to need a piece of ebony cardstock from Basil here that measures 4 1/4 by 11. I've scored it with my paper trimmer and scoring blade at 5 1/2, and when I fold that and crease along the edge with my bone folder, I will get a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base. I'm going to take and stick my matted cardstock here to my card base with some Stampin' Dimensionals in order to mat this onto my card base and have it pop up. So just place some Stampin' Dimensionals at the back of your perfect plum cardstock, remove the backing, and center and stick that to your card base, leaving equal borders on all 4 sides. So our last embellishment is to add our spool button from the Vintage Vogue spool button collections. And like I said, I was going to use my 10-inch piece of basic black 1/8 of an inch taffeta ribbon. I am going to need that at this time. I'm going to take and create a bow out of that 10-inch piece of ribbon by creating my 2 loops, crisscrossing them, and tying that into a bow. I'm going to fiddle with this until I'm happy with the size of the bow so that it is in proportion with my project. Once you're happy with that, you can trim off the tails. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to stick this down using some mini glue dots. So I'm going to place a mini glue dot on the back of my button, or of my ribbon bow, stick that to the center of my spool button. Then I'm going to place a few mini glue dots on the back of my school button. And these are super cute spools. They add a beautiful element to just about any one of our projects. And I just happen to think it worked well with our stitching here, or quilting look to the front of our card. So then you're just going to take and stick this to the right hand side of your card, directly over top of that first piece of basic black taffeta ribbon. And there you have your finished card. I hope you enjoyed stamping with me. So let's take a look at this week's Freebie Friday prize pack. As part of the collection pack, you'll receive 6 double-sided 12 by 12 inch pattern papers. As well, we have also included the Vintage Vogue spool buttons that coordinate beautifully with the paper. So all you have to do to enter to win this collection pack is to visit the Paper Crafters Library blog. Enter a comment in the post you see here. If you're watching this video from somewhere other than our blog, you'll find a direct link to this post in the video description section. While you're there, I invite you to check out our video library by clicking on the video library link at the top of our blog. Whether you're a beginner looking to learn the basics or an advanced paper crafter looking to learn new skills and techniques, you'll find it all here. Stamping, card making, scrapbooking, and altered art, we cover it all. With over 700 videos currently in our library and new videos added almost daily, we are the largest and most comprehensive online library of video tutorials for paper crafters on the internet. We invite you to visit our library and see what we're all about. The winner for this week's giveaway will be announced on our blog on Friday, March 23rd. See you on the blog!